Well, it's a couple of minutes after 2, so let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to thank Chip for making this space available and Wood for making sure all of our stuff is working so we could still live stream. If you're watching on route29solutions.org, you can go under panel meetings, panel documents, and see the agenda and the presentation for today's meeting. For those that are here, if you do need a rest break, it's through that door, and there's a men's room and a ladies' room right to the right out that door. If we need to leave here for any reason, there's an exit through that same path or back around behind me, and the rallying point is at the Water Street parking garage. But
and there's also coffee.
And there's also coffee. Let's go ahead and do a quick round of introductions. Henry?
Yeah, Henry Weintrack, Express Car Wash Consultant.
Kristen Sakis, Charlottesville City Council.
Mark Graham, Wall County.
Morgan Butler, Southern Environmental Officer.
Chip Royals, the Planning District Commission.
And our technical folks, technical team.
Lou Hatter, VDOT Communications.
Joel Nunzi, VDOT Charlottesville residents.
Matt Shiley, VDOT Regional Operations.
John Lynch, VDOT Corporate District.
Dave Covington, VDOT Charlottesville residents.
Rallying point is.
Wood Hudson, Charlottesville Albemarle MPO, and TJPDC.
There's also coffee.
Cool, very good. Go ahead to the next one. Folks must have known that the secretary and commissioner were showing up at our last meeting because we had about twice as many viewers, probably 30 folks from VDOT. But anyway, 35 viewers, 52 streams, and about the same in terms of average minutes per stream. Go ahead, Wood. 15 emails or phone calls in over the last monthly period. One suggested adding bike lanes, continuing bike lanes further south on Bergmar from Hilton Heights, and I think some folks are doing what they need to do to look into that or study it based on the response that we sent. Those are not part of this package of projects. 3 more commented about merging and pavement markings at the GSI, and I really do understand the sensitivity to the fact that every month there's somebody or the same person making a comment about the merging and weaving. There's a camera there in the intersection that we monitored for a couple of weeks, as well as field monitoring by Dave and Joel. And the bottom line is that we still don't anticipate making any changes. We just have not seen any abnormal level of issues. Is that fair to say, Dave, with weaving and merging? Now, obviously, it's taking place because people were doing that before to get from where they were to where they needed to be to make a right turn or a left turn before the GSI. One commented about the signing, the signs need to be further away from the interchange, or from the intersection. And for those of you that might remember that conversation, based on a review we did with you, we did pull the overhead signs back on average about 850 feet from where the traffic engineering manual suggests that they should be. One was about 900 and some feet, the other one was 800 and some feet. So we'll keep an eye on it. I'm sure that a motorist has driven through there and seen somebody make a dramatic weave. I'm sure that happened before. We just haven't seen it to a point that we would say something needs to be done differently with the signs or the pavement. One commented that time to cross Ryle intersection is longer than before. I guess we could balance that with the comments we've gotten from folks previously that said traffic move quicker. One asked if Ashwood would be extended to Burkmar. That's, even though we discussed that, that's not part of the current project. County is exploring this Riley Mills connector to Burkmar. And I guess that's been working its way through the smart scale process. A person wrote just to ask for some general information regarding Burkmar extension, a developer. One commented about construction vehicles on Route 29 widening project, and those comments were referred to Lane Corman. They've got a safety manager on site that is monitoring the construction vehicles. Very much aware of the requirements for safety there.
Hey, Philip, before we move
Yes.
on, can we go back to the comment about time to cross the Rio intersections longer than before? Do we know, do they mean from basically one side of Rio to the other side, getting through, going east to west or west to east?
Going through the intersection, through the signal.
Okay. Do we have any information on that? I mean, I've noticed anecdotally in my experience that it seems to be mostly I'm taking left turns when I go up to the local lanes. But do we have any kind of, I assume those lights are being monitored pretty closely.
Yes, they are.
They're running
They are.
efficiently.
They are. They're all still being monitored and still being tweaked. As of the end of last month, there was still some tweaking going on. Now, maybe either in March or in April, it might be good to take a step back and look at all of the tweaking that have taken place. There are some recent time trials that have been run, and at least from the data I've seen, it wouldn't indicate that things are taking longer than before, that in fact travel times are decreasing, which is what you would want them to do. Yes, they are. But it's just one that we'll need to keep looking at. Still being monitored and still being tweaked as of last month. There was an early closure one night at Route 29 and Ashwood, and that was to replace some disruptive power service, and that power was back on by 9 p.m. that particular evening. I'm not sure which bridge project this was, but somebody wrote in and asked about a bridge project that's not part of these projects. I don't know.
We had a public hearing last night.
Okay. So maybe they just happened to write in on the Route 29 inbox. Okay. One asked if FHWA's record of decision on former bypass encumbered the former bypass right of way. No. I mean, Morgan, correct me if I'm wrong. But no, it does not. I don't remember the date on that record of decision. I think it's well past the 3-year mark.
2003.
Yeah, but no, it doesn't, and any future federally funded work on a bypass or any other project has to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act, but that FHWA rod doesn't hang any encumbrances on the bypass right away. One business owner wrote and kind of wanted to know why their Todd sign was removed. No signs have been removed. There were some changes in the directional kind of pieces of those signs after the GSI opened.
And Todd stands for,
Tourist, or it's all the blue and white signs.
okay.
The Morgan Butler Memorial signs. It's all the signs that went up as part of the business assistance program, which used that Todd's kind of program requirements. But none have been removed. They were updated. There was some directional changes that took place after the GSI was opened, and VDOT did verify that that particular sign is still there. I can't quite remember the details, but I think it's in August of this year. Letters will go out to the owners of those businesses and advise them that if they want to continue on the Todd's program, they will have to pay the annual fee and meet the requirements for Todd's sign, I believe. There were a couple that we put up during the interim period that didn't meet the seating requirements or some other requirements. Maybe one or two. One comment about new traffic pattern at Route 29 in Ridgewood Mobile Home Park. That entrance was constructed as designed in the plans, so there's really no issues there that we're aware of. One asked, and I presume this was somebody getting ready to travel, because we've had that comment come up before, were there going to be any disruptions or congestion between 4 and 5 a.m. and the answer is no, not that any were expected.
Does sound like an airport call.
Yeah. There's been a handful of those maybe that, hey, gotta catch a plane and what's gonna be going on. In Hillsdale, there was several comments. Jeanette walked in just at the right time. There was several comments that came from a variety of sources about this issue at Greenbrier and Hillsdale that's work for the sewer line. The city did issue an advance alert for that. The work is going to be continuing for about 6 weeks, but I believe the workers are already out of that particular intersection.
They're out of the intersection, they are usually
There's been a handful of those maybe.
in
Right.
out.
Slaggers out there, and they are also aware that they need to be on the watch out, on the lookout to help pedestrians cross safely.
Yeah, crosswalks are completely.
Yeah, okay. That did create a little flurry. Interest from folks, understandable. There were some comments about signs that needed to be replaced. I think a speed limit sign somehow come down and needed to be replaced, and a sign blew off during a storm somewhere, and I think all those have been taken care of. Jeanette's done a good job of responding to these comments as they come in. Got a request for the project landscaping plans, and there was one request to repair a fence. Jeanette, anything else about any of those?
No, we got another comment regarding, again, the Albemarle County sewer.
Yeah,
Work
okay.
Today, which I again responded that
Okay.
traffic will need to be held up on,
There were some
average is
comments
2 to
about
3 minutes. They're
signs
being
needed to be
cognizant
replaced,
also
like a
of
speed
lunch
limit
hour
sign
to try and improve even that.
Okay.
The worst that we've held up traffic is 10 minutes in both directions, but they're aware that 29 is right there. We need to keep traffic moving off 29.
Is that traffic alert one that you would like reissue each week, or?
I certainly could.
You might think about that and just reissuing it so it stays out there in terms of public awareness.
Yeah, we normally use VDOT for our traffic alerts. This is the first one on this project that we were actually impacting traffic. So we went ahead and issued it through the project website, NDS's mailing list. We had Miriam Dickler, our communication director,
Okay.
also communicated out, so we can certainly do that.
Okay, and if Lou can help you there with anything, happy to do it. All right, very good. We did get, hey Brad, is that traffic alert one that? Right on in. We did get, Dave actually got 2 comments on hydraulic, and we thought we'd just pop them up here. One made a comment that any consideration of extending Hillsdale further south needs to consider connecting it to the bypass. And one comment suggested that consideration be given to, I think the term they used was controlled, signalized pedestrian crossing at hydraulic. So we'll keep collecting those comments and then roll that over to the hydraulic panel, and we'll talk about that group before we break up today. We did get, Dave actually got 2 comments.
Before we get off.
Hydraulic.
We just quickly go back to.
Yeah. Okay.
Kind of as part of the project. In doing so, we're looking at, is it possible to paint bike lanes again? If not, maybe sharers or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We are working on that.
Okay.
And it almost is kind of.
Okay. So we would do it under the project or just do it under the Route 29 program?
Not by the way.
Yeah, not by Lincoln.
Done by.
Right.
It'll
Okay.
be part, we're gonna add it to our paving schedules.
Okay. All right.
And then Nathan Umber's group is working on striping.
So at some point in the next 30 to 60 days, would you know if we were doing it or not?
I think we're certainly gonna, we decided we're gonna pave it, whether we can, it's whether we, it's.
With the bike lanes a little.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
like,
the bike lanes might not fit in the entire corridor
okay,
due to the width of the existing corridor. We're looking at it, whether it's
Okay.
arrows or a combination of bike lanes.
Okay.
We're gonna do something.
okay.
We haven't gotten the plan yet.
All right, I got you, okay, all right. There were no new postings on the website. Chris Reed did get a couple of calls. Pretty routine, request, actually. Fence needed to be, I think, reinstalled. Property owner wanted to know what type of fence was going to be installed by their property. Lane Corman, property owners, talked about that. One asked for a little additional stone at a driveway entrance. That was taken care of. And then Chris had a handful of phone calls about work schedules. So nothing really out of the ordinary there. Okay. Okay with that. Report on panel feedback. Let me flip over here so I don't forget. Kristen, I think you asked about summarizing injuries associated with accidents, and Joel's pulled that together. We'll see that in item A. Henry, I believe, asked about whether we could review VDOT's access management policy. We were talking about that as it relates to Burkmar. We're going to pull that up on the March agenda. And the other thing that I forgot to add, and Morgan reminded me, I will ask Jennifer Mitchell to visit with us at the March meeting for an update on the Lynchburg, DC, Amtrak line, since we don't want to forget that's an important part of the project. I had asked Jennifer back in January, and she asked if we could sort of waive that off during the General Assembly, which.
I understand there was a question about timing that they may know by March.
Yeah, okay.
We had a meeting too.
Okay,
Or,
okay.
State folks.
All right. The other thing that I forgot to add, and Morgan reminded me, I will ask Jennifer Mitchell to visit with us. Any thoughts, items for upcoming meetings, Chip?
No, the only thing I would ask, especially the folks that are watching, it's a different format they're seeing today.
Yes.
Would love any kind of comments that they might have, better, worse.
Okay, that's a good point.
Video reviews.
I may or may not explain this for people that are watching, but today we're actually using the PDC's software, we're using a different software package because we're in a different location for this meeting. And that's a good point. If you're watching and if you have a thought about this technology versus what you've seen previously, it would, and you could take 2 seconds to flip us a note. That would be good. You could use the inbox at Route 29 Solutions or any of the panel members or me or whatever you do. That's good. Thank you, Chip.
And maybe just for those of you who can't see, the software this time has as the main picture the presentation, and then the picture in a picture is Philip or the live broadcast. So rather than having to see the presentation through the camera.
Chip, are you saying you have better technology than VDOT?
I was trying to do it more politely than that.
He's offering that up as one possibility.
John Lynch, has talked to the VDOT IT folks. to write John to see if we could do something.
Way to raise the bar, Chip.
But it is good, I mean, it's really,
And to balance it out, in case there were any hurt feelings, it was the fact that this panel was using the video that kind of inspired Chip to do it here, so. We'll just keep leapfrogging technology.
These are VDOT people, they don't have feelings.
I don't believe it.
we started a statewide revolution. I know Aubrey, the next CTV meeting, I think like days before said, you know, these folks can't be live streaming and us not doing it. But this technology is interesting, because even if you watch the CTV meetings, sort of like ours have been, you're looking at the people, but if the person behind the podium is referring to a presentation, you don't see the presentation. At least with us, ours is up and you can page along with it. But, you know, we're all learning, and Chip is pushing us to new levels. Morgan?
Not anything.
I don't know, we may wanna discuss this under 11, but with the hydraulic area planning, I'm just kinda curious, you know, what kind of communication back and forth between Route 29 versus hydraulic.
Technology is interesting, because even if you watch the CTV meetings. Okay, sure. We'll discuss that under, if that's okay with you. Okay, right?
I used up my time.
Good.
You mentioned trains, Lynchburg to Washington,
We're all learning.
and
Chip is pushing us to.
I saw a little issue at our Amtrak station, and I had trouble to figure out who do I need to talk to, city, VDOT, or who knows? Well, I got city and VDOT here, so I'm going to bring it up even if it's totally unrelated to what you're doing, Phil. I had to pick up people at the Amtrak station who were coming from New York. It was dark. There's nice lighting on the platform. And then there's this bridge, West Main Street, which I think is owned by VDOT. There's no lighting underneath. It's hard.
I think it's owned by the railroad, isn't it?
Well, no, the bridge is West Main.
Yes,
The railroad goes underneath.
yes.
I don't know where the bridge is. Maybe you know. The bottom line is for a few $1,000s.
Need lighting under the bridge.
You could have nice lighting under the bridge, and when people arrive in Charlottesville, at least you can recognize them. They get off the train, it's so dark you can't even see them. And the rest of the platform, way out is fine, they have lighting there, that's right there, and they all have to come under the bridge to get out of the platforms.
Right.
It's a very small project, but it needs to be done. It has been like that for years, and it's hard. Thank you.
We'll take that up. Okay.
I think it's owned by the railroad, isn't it?
Well, no, the bridge
What?
is West Main.
Yes.
All right, on our percents complete, for some reason.
No red on there.
We're doing okay. Route 29 widening, whoops, sorry. Route 29 widening, moving ahead on all the interim milestones. Berkmar, about the same, I guess the roadway construction is getting toward the end, and we'll see those pop up.
I guess it depends on roadway construction versus paving. and all
Right,
that stuff, so
right.
it kind of, that might be.
It's all where it needs to be. It's all where it needs to be. On Hillsdale, finished up the bridge substructure, everything else continuing to move forward. I guess, Jeanette, we are expecting a re-baseline schedule from the contractor, and you might recall, Lane Corman did that at maybe one or two different points. And part of that has to do with the incentive that we're putting in place for Hillsdale. So some of these bars are gonna move once, I think you have the draft schedule in for review. So once that review is completed and approved, we'll adjust a few of these bars accordingly. Everything else continuing to move. Dave, you want to, well, any questions here? Dave? We are expecting a re-baseline schedule from.
Good afternoon. This is a little bit different format, a little different layout. Next slide. So I've dropped the RIO GSI because there's really no activity to talk about other than how it's operating, which we're doing in another format.
I just had that on the agenda out of habit.
So kind of moving forward, I'm not planning on talking about it.
Can I interrupt you on the PSI?
Yes.
The sun barriers, are they gonna be painted like, the other project?
On 29-250?
Yeah,
Yes, they're gonna be stained. Actually, that is scheduled to begin in next month.
yeah, okay, because they did the work on Rio 29, and I figured they would move on and do
Yeah,
that one.
that's,
No, we knew we were gonna throw that over into 2017.
Yeah, that's temperature sensitive,
Okay.
so you have to get through. So yeah, that's actually scheduled.
I was wondering, I drove by and said, where did they paint it all?
Yeah, it's coming next month.
Okay, good.
So starting with,
although it's gonna be spring tomorrow, just so you know.
it
From
will be
now on.
spring tomorrow. Unfortunately, it's gonna get down to about 28 degrees overnight, so, but yeah, they need 40-degree temperatures for that stain. We're looking forward to spring.
Getting there.
I'm excited. Okay, starting with 29 widening, this week, we always have erosion control maintenance on our list to make sure that we're keeping up with that. Finalizing structure 11-1, if you recall, that was one of the jack and bores we've been talking about for quite some time. That's done, so working on head walls and end walls for that this week to be completely done with it. Grading and curb backup installation along the entire project. A lot of asphalt paving going on right now between 29 widening and Brookmore, as we'll see when we start looking at some of the pictures. Steel plates at Hollymead, the first set went in last night on South Hollymead. Tonight they're gonna do North Hollymead. That allows them to get the water main across and then get it repaved and back to normal function. Roadway grading throughout the northbound lane section. Abandonment of existing storm sewers, that's something that's pretty typical as we replace these older storm sewers, we abandoned the existing ones. Storm sewer installation, phase 3 water main installation, and phase 2 water main testing. And I think we're actually a little bit ahead of what we're showing on the progress update, but that's a very fluid thing that changes day to day. They had a fantastic night last night. We're getting a lot of pipe installed, so that's going really well. Jack and Moore structure 9-2, that is still going on, but it will be done by next week. So they're making good progress on that now.
We're not gonna believe any of that until we see it all.
I can show you the pipe. We were there yesterday, but that's one of the things we've been keeping an eye on. It's not holding anything up as progress wise, but it's like, okay guys, let's get this done. It's a very challenging one. It's a very, very long Jack and Moore, so it causes problems. Ashwood signal pole and light pole foundation are going up this evening, I believe, the signal pole, and temporary seeding this week. So we are continuing to seed through the winter, which is fantastic. We're having great weather, so we'll keep putting that seed down. Next slide. So here's a picture of some of the curb installation. He's brushing it right there to put a texture on it. So this is a little bit, actually this is just north of Asheville Boulevard, looking north. So that's what that operation looks like right now. So a lot of curb going in, that's good. Next slide.
Now, the curb is poured separate.
It's a very challenging.
Put on.
Very, very long.
Can you give me that picture? Am I looking at something that looks like a sidewalk, but it is, it isn't, it's just
This is the gutter
curbing,
pan.
this is the gutter part.
So
Okay,
there's the gutter pan and there's the curb, which is 2 feet wide.
but the curb comes in separately. It's not
The
poured.
curb is part of the gutter pan.
Well, that's what
It's a
okay.
little hard to see here. See
Okay,
how
now
it's-
I'm looking very carefully, I start to see it, okay.
Yep, we have the same type of curve that we have on
Yes,
Friday,
yes,
where
yes,
it's laid back.
I was
There
wondering,
is a ridge there.
yeah, I see it now, okay.
Yeah, that's all cast as one piece. This is Pond 3, right at the entrance to Ashwood. It is progressing. This is the jack and bore operation down in here. There's actually, you can see a little bit of the jack there. So there's jack and boring this way underneath the roadway at an angle. Pond 3 is coming up. You can see the embankment. They've got all the drainage structures in. So pretty soon, this will be complete. They can start sending that water to the stormwater management pond and start removing some of their erosion control as they can use the pond for that erosion control. So making some progress here. They ran into a lot of rock. You'll see a lot of stuff where they've done some drilling to break up the rock and they ripped it with a dozer. So it's been a little more effort than they thought it would be, but it's on schedule. This is a look at a trench box. It's part of the water main installation in one of the RWSA valves that was installed. So right now they are approaching South Hollymead. So they're probably about halfway, a little bit more than halfway between Ashwood and South Hollymead. This is basically 1.8 miles of 24-inch water main relocation. So it's a pretty big undertaking there. But that's what that operation looks like. This is the 24-inch water main, and that's what one of the RWSA valves looks like. They're pretty gigantic valves, but that carries a lot of water. So there's a really extensive testing process that goes on there as far as pressure testing, chlorination, dechlorination, testing for bacteria and other contaminants. It all has to take place before the water main is put in service. I think that's all the slides we have on the slide now. So, little continuation of the work this week with the lane closures. We did have the overnight closures of North Hollymead and South Hollymead this week. So last night, the closure of South Hollymead with a detour at North Hollymead, and then tonight will be a closure of North Hollymead with a detour onto South Hollymead. So not a very extensive detour there. It's actually set up very well for a quick and easy detour. Really extensive. So that you should expect that tonight. I believe that's done for the water main crossing. Won't have to happen again until they reconstruct the intersections. Next slide. So over the next couple of weeks, continuing with erosion control maintenance, fine grading the northbound lanes between Polo Grounds and Ashwood. So now they've got that mass grading done. They're coming through with fine gradings and we'll come through with stone. Ditch grading throughout the project, grading north of Ashwood, continuing the storm sewer installation, beginning the phase 4 water main relocation. That is the final phase, there are 4 phases. Phase 3 water main testing, completing that jack and board structure 9 and 2, and installing junction boxes. These are for the signal, excuse me, at Ashwood and Hollymead.
Question about
Yes.
that. The bike pedestrian trail that's accompanying this, is it gonna be open before the whole project is done, or is it sort of at the very end?
That will be one of the last features that they do, so it probably won't open up until right at the very end.
Okay.
Simply because it's the furthest to the east, and they kind of work from the west to the east. So yeah, that'll be about the same time as the rest of the project. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that over the next 2 weeks, we have some potential for some single lane closures at nighttime for delivery of materials. We do have a slope that we're going to rework on the southbound side, one of the ditch slopes that will require a single lane closure, probably just for 2 to 3 hours one night. So we'll get back to that periodic. Maybe there'll be a single lane closure, maybe not, but it'll be nighttime. So any questions on 29 wide? That project is on schedule. We looked at the schedule just now for completion by the end of June. We don't see any instructions to the east. Okay, the next slide, please. Moving on to Burkmar this week, erosion control maintenance, intermediate asphalt paving. We did a little bit of asphalt paving at the early part of the week. We had some good weather. We got a little bit of cold weather. The asphalt plant, Shamong, they have shut down for 2 weeks. Every year they have to shut down for 2 weeks to do all their annual maintenance. So we probably aren't going to see any more paving for about another week and a half. But they have gotten a very large portion of Burkmar done. Abutment A and B grading. So this is grading kind of behind the abutment and approaching the approach slab. A is done. They're still working on B. The bridge parapet walls, the first wall is going to be poured tomorrow. So today they set up their formal work. We did an inspection on their rebar. They'll be pouring tomorrow. Temporary seeding. Landscaping starts late this week. Hopefully they start late this week, depending on the weather. It looks like we're going to get some weather, good weather. And then continue into next week, they'll have 2 crews, so they'll get through a lot of that very quickly. And then pressure testing the water main on the north end. That was a betterment where ACSA asked Lane Foreman to give them a price for installing a water main that will be put into service sometime in the future.
Why don't you just take a half a minute and let them know how a betterment works inside of the contract?
So Well, and it really isn't inside of the contract, it's actually outside of the contract. So we have a contract with Lane Corman to build, they're gonna be there, they have all the equipment there, they have the knowledge and ability to build a water line. So ACSA.
While you're at it.
Huh?
While you're at it.
Exactly, while you're at it, would you give us a price, cause we're interested in putting a water main in this section of the road. And so they worked it out, it's a separate agreement between Lane Corman and ACSA. So, I mean, we support it, we like partnering with ACSA, so it works out to everybody's benefit.
And it's the same situation that Jeanette has, let them know how Greenbrier.
Yes, but it is part of our.
That's right, part of yours, it's part of yours.
Yeah, that was a slightly different, that was
Yeah,
actually
that's right,
the add
that's right.
correct? It was
It was a bid additive and the interchange, it was all in one contract.
and part of that is because the utility is part of the, is that ACSA? Okay.
CSA,
Alright, yeah.
for Hillsdale.
So it's not part of the city, but, okay, so that was included in, but you didn't have to accept that price, for instance, if it were high, you could have not accepted it and then made that work. So, similar, but slightly different. So
It's
ours is
betterment inside the contract.
betterment inside the contract, ours is betterment outside the contract. So we're not a party to that, we don't do inspection except if it's in the road.
In this case, this is a water main that is being replaced, or it's a water main that is for future use.
This is a new water main that at some point in the future, ACSA will put in service to extend their service further to the north.
I see, so it'll be plugged up on both ends.
Yes.
Essentially,
Yes.
it'll be ready to be used
Yes.
if and when the time comes, okay.
So it's not part of the city.
While you got everything dug up, you might as well stick it in now.
Okay, look at a few pictures. This is at abutment A, so this is on the south side of the river, looking at the approach slab. So we talked about approach slabs, we talked about finger joints. This is what it is. So on just about every bridge, you have an approach slab leading up to it, so you don't get that settlement and that bump right at the end of the bridge. That is one of the last major components, aside from obviously the parapet walls and the barrier wall, that separates the traffic lane from the shared use path. That's what they're beginning to pour tomorrow, is those parapet walls and barrier walls.
The asphalt goes all the way up to the joint.
The asphalt will go all the way up to the edge of the bridge. So this will be under asphalt, you won't see it, but it prevents that settlement. So that's what we're looking at there. I figured it was good to see those and be able to visualize what we've been talking about for a while. Next slide. This is a pretty good shot of some asphalt. This is actually, if I remember correctly, this is still the base, and this is after one lane and the intermediate paving was done. So this is looking to the north, a little bit further north of the mid alignment. You can see the curb here is all installed, the shared use path is graded out, the sidewalk on the other side is graded. Ditches for the most part are in, and they're just putting that asphalt on, and as soon as the asphalt is done, they go back and pave the shared use paths and the sidewalks, and effectively at that point we have a road. So we're getting pretty close here.
Why do I see curb and gutter on the right and I don't see it on the left?
Okay, on the left, the road was designed to accommodate future widening. So if you think about a 4-lane divided road with a raised median, everything drains to the outside. So we only have a curb on that median side. So if and when Berkmar is widened, we don't have to get out into traffic to rebuild that. We just basically build another 2 lanes, grade out the median, and we got a 4-lane roadway.
Sure.
So all your water is draining to this side and curb and gutter on this side. Storm drain. Good question. This is just another picture of the bridge, but what I really wanted to show you was the grading that's going on behind above the B. In fact, this picture was taken toward the latter part of last week. It's actually substantially lower now, so they're grading out that last little section of Berkmar just north of the river. Just around the bend here, where you can barely see, you can't see it from here, it's paved all the way down to that point. So what you're looking at here, and that portion on the north side of the river, is the only section left that needs base and intermediate asphalt, and then the whole thing will need that finished surface course. So we're really moving along with asphalt, and we expect that by the time this grading gets done, they open the plant back up, the within a couple of weeks after that, we'll probably have just about MVP asphalt. In fact, this picture was taken, and I think we have one more slide. This was taken from these kind of big piles of dirt that were up there behind the coals up at Town Center. And you can kind of see the road and the asphalt and how much is on it. Good progress on Burkmore, definitely on track for finishing by June, if not earlier. The only section left that needs base. Okay, go to the next slide. We can look at what we have coming up over the next couple of weeks. Well, first, the lane closures. We do have this new traffic pattern at Burkmore and Hilton Heights while the roundabout is being built. So we've got stop conditions on the two approaches. The entrance to Sam's Club is permanently closed now. They'll get a new entrance off of Burkmore once that road is complete. This was taken, but be aware of that. It's actually, in my opinion, a much safer condition there. We always had that, do I go, do I not go kind of thing. So now everybody comes to a stop. So it's working well. So the next 2 weeks, next slide, erosion control again, grading the remaining portions of the sidewalk area, constructing the berm fills. We do have a lot of areas out here where we are using the material that was excavated to build berms, which create a visual and noise barrier, not only to some of the residents, but also some of the other areas out there. So the construction of those berms is ongoing now, and will continue over the next few weeks. The parapet walls, which I mentioned, they're starting to pour next week, so we've probably got a good 2 or 3 weeks worth of pouring concrete on all of those. Landscaping continues into next week. Storm sewer installation at Hilton Heights will begin soon, so we'll start to see a little bit more MOT focus at that intersection of Burkmore and Hilton Heights while they're constructing the roundabout. There's some utilities there, some water main extension, very small little 8-inch service main, and a storm sewer extension, so that's coming up. And under drain installation and installing the light pole foundations at Hilton Heights, because that will be lit in about a few weeks. And then if we can go to the next slide, upcoming lane closures, potential nighttime closures at Hilton Heights for that work I just talked about, and again, new traffic pattern. Any questions on both?
Good afternoon, everyone. For work this week at Hillsdale, retaining wall excavation and undercut. We have another day of leveling pad installation, a couple more days of unit placement, and then a couple more weeks of backfill for that retaining wall that's between the post office and the Pepsi plant. The undercut and fill at Stormwater Basin, we've received a geotechnical recommendation. We're gonna proceed with an undercut between 2.5 to 4 feet in depth, and then just placement of regular old fill. So you're gonna start to see activity there hopefully next week. Street light conduit is being installed this week. There's prepping for sidewalk as well as a shared use path between Whole Foods and India Drive on that new section that's by Homewood Suites that we're hoping to open up soon. We have riprap placement at both abutments, A and B of the bridge, as well as placing a lot of fill behind abutment A. We have the betterment that started this week for Albemarle County Service Authority on Greenbrier Drive. We started at the easternmost section and will be moving to the west. And business sign installation has been moved to next week, and that's for that upcoming detour that I'll discuss in a little bit. We have a flagging operation that's ongoing at Greenbrier Drive. We're in week 1 of a 6-week operation. The easternmost end was actually in the intersection with Hillsdale and Greenbrier. It probably had the most impact there. The workers are 15 feet in the ground, in a trench box in the middle of the road. So there were some interruptions to service, that's why we have the flaggers out there to make sure that the workers were safe as well as the traveling public. So while flagging will be ongoing, it probably was worse the very first day that we were out there on Tuesday. So I guess we have a few pictures of what we've been doing out there. And this is the Homewood Suite section that we're hoping to open up later next week.
So looking at that picture, is Whole Foods over our right shoulder?
Yes, Whole Foods is kind of behind us. This is Homewood Suites, construction trailer, and you're headed towards SPA frontage. We have a shared use path off to the right. So it's shaping up nicely. We have the curb, we have at least the base layer asphalt in. So I'm excited to open up our first section.
You just point out this is a different asphalt plant, so they're not close to cube.
Yeah, because I was like, I was
Oh, good.
hearing that, I was like, oh, that's right on. And this is Pepsi bottling plant. The post office, the shopping center is behind us, and this is the southern abutment. So this is some of the fill that they're placing. All the wing walls are done. You can't see the treatment, it's covered, protecting it from getting dirty and whatnot before we do the staining. And the staining will take place quite a bit further on. And you also should see the retaining wall.
We have another picture.
There's another picture up there.
Okay, oh good. Alright, and there's the retaining wall, so these are a couple units tall. This is Pepsi. They have a drive aisle through here. It's been very tight, they've been very good to work with. We've really appreciated all the cooperation from them and the post office.
So the road's up there where that yellow thing is.
It will be on top, so there is going to be fencing on top, and then the shared use path, and then the roadway.
So the lane you see now between two retaining walls.
Well, this is actually a building. This
Oh,
is
it's
the
a
Pepsi building.
Okay, okay.
That's their
Got it.
property.
And then, yeah, the retaining wall. And that is done without, it's not an MSE, there's no straps. We were looking for future maintenance. This is a T-wall system, so it's based on the unit as well as the fill. So it will help, hopefully with future maintenance, if we need to install a utility or something in the roadway, we're not cutting into
So the road's up
what's
there.
holding that wall together. Next slide. And this is probably our most unusual aspect of this job, which is where we went through the building. So to me, at least, I think this looks great. It kind of looks like we didn't do anything
Looks
at
like it was
all.
built that way.
So this is the final result. We're going to be walking through with the property owner. We're gonna also be videotaping per special provisions to make sure we're giving them exactly what they want, what they expected, and taking away some of our liability, because we did touch that building.
And the nail expo people gain 2 windows.
Yeah,
Yes, they
better
did,
light.
and there's gonna be a bunch of customers, hopefully bicycling by and walking by, looking in, so. That's great. And we have heard from the property owner that they will be refreshing and hopefully making some improvements. They were thinking maybe in conjunction with this project, maybe a little bit after, so we're already seeing some good effects of this roadway project's doing with the property owner. And next, so, for the work for the next 2 weeks, we're gonna be finishing up the retaining wall. We have at least a couple more weeks on that. We have finally figured out what to do with the stormwater basin, so we're gonna be moving forward with that as well. We have the sanitary sewer project, another 5 weeks at least, which is a betterment. And then we have storm sewer installation, several other things going on. Making sure that the bridge is moving along with a lot of work on the basins and stormwater management. So flagging operations along Greenbrier Drive, that's gonna continue. And then we have an upcoming closure of a section of Line Drive. So we're going to be opening up the Homewood Suite section up to Line Drive. But we also need to, we have the roadway or the roundabout construction that we need to do. But 2, we also have a section in between the roundabout and the new section of Homewood Suites that we're going to need to do a complete reconstruction on. So we're gonna go all the way down past the sub base and have to build up from there. So we're looking at a closure of this road. We were thinking maybe starting on Monday. That's been pushed back a week. I'm going to go to the 6 businesses that are going to be impacted. So we're looking at Homewood Suites, Hampton Inn, and the 4 businesses that face 29. So that's the UPS store, Sprint, nail store, and Sherman Wilkins. We've altered the detour signage as well as the detour map, so that customers know where to go. Best case, 2 weeks. Probable, a month is what we're looking at, that's worst case, that's what we'll be
Is that
communicating.
dependent on work or dependent on weather or?
Yes, it's mostly dependent on weather and if something pops up, expected,
It's
but
gonna be perfect weather.
perfect weather, and we've already been communicating with the contractor that please focus on this, to keep this moving. The roundabout itself, that construction has, in the preliminary baseline schedule, looks like it's gonna happen in April, and it looks to be about a month in duration. And we're still on time.
Can you, just speak for a moment again to the incentive that, I
Yes.
mean, we reviewed that last month, but.
Reviewed it last month, we've also reviewed it with the contractor, so it looks like we're just waiting on signatures, I'm hoping. Just to keep minor
Maybe
edits.
just summarize the
Yes.
150 or the 200.
So, what was it? It was 150 for the roundabout. And what we were asking to receive that incentive, you reduce construction of the roundabout to 30 days, and you complete the contract on time.
Right. So it's connected to both of them.
Yes, and if it is also prorated,
Right.
so you can get a partial incentive, as long as you meet some of the, yes, definitely by October 30th. And then the second one is if you could do early completion of the project, you get another 200,000, and again.
30 days, I think it was September 30th.
Yes, 30 days. So that's another 200,000, and it can be prorated as well. Currently, the schedule is showing that we are completing on time. And what we were asking to receive that incentive, you reduce construction of the roundabout. All right, are there any questions? And you complete the contract on time. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane. Go ahead. Yeah. Spent a little bit more money, last month, about 3 million invoiced on the design build programs, about, $500,600,000 on Hillsdale, so over the last month, total of about 3.5 million that was invoiced. Change order, and I'm not sure what it might have been before, but 98,000 on Hillsdale, Jeanette came out of exposure.
Two change orders.
2 change orders, okay, alright.
Yeah, we have 2 change orders processed. We have several more in.
That would be over this potentially this
350,000
exposure.
of that, I'm hoping is that incentive.
About 2 million invoice. And that's about it. Still waiting, I guess, just to clean up the Route 29 contract value, 29,250.
That's actually under a separate contract. Yeah, I haven't.
Change order, I'm not sure. Okay. 98,000 on. So, I mean, there's nothing extraordinary there or unusual. The rate of spending is obviously coming down. Still expect to end up very good here. That would be over, potentially from expenditures compared to budget. And it's really been efficiently managed, Dave, and everybody involved has done a good job. Just to clean up the Route 29 contract value. Okay. I think the next is the action. Joel, if you'll run through this a bit, and Kristen, Joel, we go back and pull some injury data.
Precisely what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yep, so as of the last meeting, we are requested to look at some injuries, and this is what we have. So just to explain here real quickly, you have your total number of crashes for each time period, 2012 through 2016.
From expenditure.
Total number of injury crashes. So 10 of the 31 crashes were injury crashes. These numbers here.
More than one person in them.
Yeah, these are occupants of vehicles. So when you have 15 minor injuries, 15 people, it could have been, you could have had multiple injuries in one vehicle, multiple vehicles per accident, things like that. So
Run through this a bit.
these lines here would add up to the total number of occupants in the vehicles involved in 31 crashes. But these will not add up to the total number of crashes. So don't try and add those numbers together.
One thing that I noticed just doing my kind of eye math was that from the top, the 10 of 31 is like a third of the crashes involved some injury. And the next few, well, the first two are a third, the second two are about a quarter of the crashes involved some injury, and in 2016, a fifth of the crashes, slightly less than a fifth of the crashes involved injury. So it's not only fewer crashes, but even fewer crashes that include injuries, which is really what I was trying to get at, so that.
And so just to give you an idea of what the injuries are, severe injuries are severe lacerations, blood loss, crushing injuries, skull injuries, abdomen or chest injuries, paralysis, pretty serious stuff. Minor injuries are bruises, cuts and scrapes, things like that that are visible. No apparent injury is an interesting one. That's something where you, someone has a complaint of soreness or they hurt their neck or something, but you can't identify it on the body, then obviously no.
The person filing the report couldn't identify.
No, if they say I have a pain in my neck, or my knee hurts or something like that, and they tell the officer that, that's no apparent injury. So the officer can't see the injury, but the person complains of pain.
It counts as an injury, but.
Counts as an injury. And then no injury is people that had no complaints or minor injuries. So then the next, we got 5 slides to show the maps. We'll start in 2012.
But just hang on there just for a minute. Kristen, that what you were looking
Precisely.
for, and I think.
Yeah, so that we could tell it, not just that there were fewer crashes, but that they were, like, even among the fewer crashes, there were a smaller proportion that involved injury. And I know it's a small n still, so it's not necessarily a trend, but it feels like a trend. And it's certainly a good place to be.
Yeah, we're seeing less severe injuries, that is a good place. We did see an increase actually in November for the post-construction period was the highest number of crashes we did have. Hopefully that's an anomaly and we'll see that go back down. But we're still seeing good trends here so far. So then the next, let's move on to the maps. Nothing really unusual in these maps, same things we've been seeing, a lot of rear end crashes at the, this is 2012, so a lot of rear end crashes as we approach congestion and signals and things.
So Joel, you just added another month worth of dots.
Yeah, we've got November dots on here, so in looking at this, I didn't notice anything unusual. It's similar to what we've seen in the past through October also. So let's go on to 13. Same kind of thing, we talked about the pedestrian collision at the last PDAB meeting where someone was causing a hit. That was a motorcycle collision where a non-collision is a motorcycle that flipped over the handlebars. And same kinds of things, angle collisions and rear end collisions. 14. Something I noticed here, this came in as an other, that was actually misclassified, it's an angle collision of the car. Ran the red light southbound 29 and hit a car that was coming across the highway. So when I reviewed that report, and it should have been a blue dot. Go on to 15. Same thing. Any questions on these? It's pretty much the same kind of pattern. We'll go on to 16. We'll talk about those. Does look like it's getting a little bit less dense. The greens are going down significantly, which is a good thing. You do have that cluster up at Woodbrook. That other up at Woodbrook is also a misclassification. That was someone that was coming southbound on 29 in the left turn lane to Woodbrook, ran a red light, and 4 cars hit him.
Joel, are we fixing misclassifications once they're correctly classified?
In the system?
Well,
they don't typically get fixed.
Can we fix them at least graphically here?
Get a blue marker.
Yeah, I mean, just.
Yeah, I didn't look these up until today. I guess I probably could make the dots.
I was gonna ask you to, for the purposes of what we're gonna display, assuming we're gonna continue to track this over the next few months. if you know it's a misclassification, fix it. And then maybe we can make a bigger dot or draw a circle around it for the current month, so we can see what's added.
I did a halo around, I tried a situation where I put a halo of a different color around crashes that involved injuries, and it looked to me to be very confusing.
Well, I'm just looking for the new ones that are added.
I could probably make them.
And that'll be, we'll have a chat.
But yeah, that was a misclassification, so we had, and that misclassification up there was actually an angle collision, that resulted in
I assume we're gonna continue to track this over the next.
two, our severe injury for this period and one of the minor injuries. We actually had two people run red lights on that same movement and caused injury crashes there.
Bigger dot.
We hadn't seen that yet, so I don't expect that to continue, I think it was just a situation where two crashes occurred.
So I was gonna ask, just basically getting at it, but we do see there is a cluster there at Woodbrook, this cycle as you pointed out. Just wondering if they look like they're a variety of different colors, so there's no clear kind of pattern emerging, but.
Well, those are typical of what you'd see with the side swipes. One of the side swipes was one of those situations where a U-turn, the rightmost U-turn decided to, the rightmost left turn lane decided to make a U-turn and hit somebody else. And then you see some blue dots in there, which are the angle collisions. I reviewed all of the crash reports. It's almost all driver error. We had two red light running crashes from left turns and things like that.
On those, for example, is that possibly people who've been there for multiple cycles and they're fed up and they're determined to get through
I wondered,
at that point?
inefficiently, or is it just?
I don't know from the crash description if we could tell that. It seemed it didn't seem to be a red light lag kind of situation where it just turned, where they were running the red light right in the minute. It looked like they just were not paying attention, because in one case 4 cars were going at full speed.
So they weren't trying to gun the light, they were just.
It didn't appear to me, it's hard to tell from those descriptions whether that was the case. I wouldn't make an assumption based on the description it was or was not. Whether I can, you know, it might be better to look at Woodbrook by itself if you wanna look at that over the years. Because although it looks like a cluster here, some other years have the same clusters going on, where we reduced crashes in this area, but not at that intersection, because really the characteristics of that intersection have not significantly changed.
Right.
From the construction of the Rio grade separated intersection.
Except
I could
people have
look
been
at that.
moving steadily for longer by the time they get there. So they weren't trying to gun the light, they were.
So I'm wondering if there are any kind of indirect effects on that intersection from this work, if there are ways that we can tweak things to reduce the likelihood that accidents are gonna occur there, that would be useful.
One of the recent changes to the traffic patterns in January may have helped that situation. That's something to keep on with getting the offset green times better in mind. It might help. And that's something we should keep an eye on. I just don't have data as of mid-January at this point.
Yeah, I think the one thing we have to be careful of in this, you said it's a small N. We're looking at data, we're not yet at the point to where we can really infer knowledge
Causality.
from the data. So
Still
I
a
think
small
it's-
sample, typically you want 3
But
years.
it can be
worth of
little,
data.
it can be red flags of,
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
this is something that's happening, we should look and see if there's a problem, yeah.
Yeah, so if I would say if we see additional red light running left turns, and maybe I give the traffic folks a call and say, hey, can you take a look at these 2 crashes? And let's keep an eye month to month if we see it happen again, or go observe what's going on out
Yeah.
there.
Cause
At
to my
those
knowledge,
times.
unless something has changed, the intersection is functioning well.
Yeah, I remember you saying everybody was getting, after the
Right.
Got through.
adjustments, everyone was getting through.
Yeah, it's good, yeah.
That while that turn lane might fill up.
But remember, this is November
Right.
data still, so there's been a couple adjustments made to the corridor since.
Yeah, you know, that's a good point, there's
So-
2 months, December,
We
January,
got a
2
lag.
months worth of change, that's a good point.
It's something to keep our eye on, but it might have already.
Well,
been
let's
looked at.
stay in the keep our eye on it mode and not get too far ahead of us ourselves.
Any other questions?
Joel, thank you. And we'll keep up that table, Kristen, everybody, with the injury centers. We mentioned, or you guys have met John Martin a couple times and the SIR folks, and we talked about their work on the business assistance program, but you may recall that they also did a different study, which is something that they've been doing for a few years now, particularly on major projects for VDOT, which is capturing this perceptions and attitudes. And it's more not, did you like the project, don't you like it? It's more focused on how are you getting your information? Are you aware of what's going on? And they do a before and after kind of deal. They just wrapped up the after piece of that here, and Lou has summarized their report and is going to go over that with us.
First of all, this is a very high-level presentation. It was like 81 slides, I think, that they.
Which is why Lou's doing it.
Thank you for not bringing 81 slides.
Sorry?
It was very detailed.
Thank you for not bringing 81 slides.
Very detailed, but as you remember, really the goals of what we were trying to do here, we had three main goals: to build overall awareness amongst the public of the projects, to increase the familiarity of the projects so people would understand what we're doing, and then most importantly of all was to encourage some action by people who use Route 29. How can they use the information that they have to vary their commute or their travel along Route 29, whatever their interaction with the road may be, so that it minimizes the inconvenience of that. So that was the purpose of the campaign, and as Philip said, they did a benchmark survey back in 2015 before we started any of the work. And then they go back and they do a wrap-up survey after the campaign is done, and so that's what they did back in December 12th to 15th. They conducted a 10-minute survey of Route 29 travelers. It was a mix of cell phones and landlines. It was targeted to Albemarle County residents who were at least 18 years of age. And they did a total of 327 10-minute surveys. So, you had to be a little bit dedicated to be willing to spend 10 minutes on the phone with somebody who you had no idea who it was to discuss this. So, go through a few results here. Hopefully, give you some idea about what they came up with. A wrap-up survey. So 4 out of 5 now these are the people who were aware of our communications effort. 4 out of 5 of those folks had seen or heard an advertisement about Route 29 solutions. 2/3 of those saw the ads on TV. 40% of them heard one of the radio ads. And then 3/4 of those folks, that same subset, rated the communications as good or excellent. And this is just what one of the respondents told the surveyor. The entire town knew what was going on and how to go through this work. Hopefully give you some idea about what they when asked to describe the ads, and this is again based on their recollection of what they had heard, the most frequent response was they mentioned the businesses being opened or that people should support the businesses. So one thing I will say about this slide is it does indicate that people were somewhat combining the VDOT advertisement campaign and the county's business assistance program. Because remember, VDOT's ad campaign was construction is ongoing, right? Be careful of the workers, be careful of where you're going, make sure you know about it. Whereas the county's campaign was the ride on 29 worth the drive. So people didn't necessarily distinguish between the two, but that's okay.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, they were aware of the fact that that was out there. The second most frequent response, so number 1 would have been the county's campaign, number 2 would have been the VDOT piece of it. So clearly both campaigns were getting their messages out. And then again, two comments from respondents. The information was accessible if I wanted to know it, right? And I thought it was interesting, they visited a business where I worked and they passed out maps for our customers. So that That was the get around maps that we distributed, some 25,000 plus of during the actual construction period last summer. The county's campaign was the rise. This is really, Dave and I talked about this a little bit about the other day. Almost 75%, 3/4 of the respondents who were aware of the information took action about it. Half of the people changed their route. 1/3 of them shifted the time that they traveled on Route 29. 1/4 of them visited our website. 21%. Okay? 21% of them attended a public meeting, and 10% provided input, either email or they did the discuss site, they called us. Somehow they provided input to us. And over 80% were aware that the intersection reopened to traffic ahead of schedule. So the messaging apparently got out, and most importantly, people took action. That's that third goal that we had, was for people to actually take action, and that was a success. So here's this is where we get into, just very briefly. VDOT, as Philip said, VDOT has done this pre and post campaign survey for about a half a dozen different projects around the state. From Northern Virginia, I-66 projects down to Hampton Roads, the Route 29 Solutions project being one of them. So, to understand this, some of these are the beginning of the projects, okay? Some of these are the end. So, the lowest score in terms of public awareness that VDOT has in the record books of this work that we've done, these surveys that we've done, was 17%. At the start of the I-66 corridor. A pretty low amount of people who even knew what was going on. At the beginning of our project, almost half the people were already aware that something was going on. Now, out of all those VDOT campaigns that have been done, the highest previous score that we got at the end of the campaign was 59% of the people being aware. That was the restoration project that we did, about 10 bridges on Interstate 95, where we replaced bridges and had to shut down the roadway for the weekend. And they did a huge advertising campaign that reached as far as Maryland and North Carolina to let people know about alternate routes. So we set a record. We are now the benchmark for VDOT's public awareness campaign. 61% was the score, and they have a kind of a complicated algorithm about how they add several percentages together, because there's several subsets involved here in terms of how the respondents reacted to different questions on the survey. But this optimal score, first, the most important thing is we moved the needle 13% in terms of the people who were aware between the beginning of this campaign and the end of the campaign. And you know, we set a new goal for VDOT to hit with these campaigns. So
you get a prize.
You
should get a prize.
I did get a prize. I had to work on hydraulics.
You do get a prize. That's great.
And then finally, I thought this was pretty fascinating here. You know, people talk a lot about how they don't want to answer the phone. You know, I don't want to have anything to do with marketing people. Folks don't want to be engaged. It's hard to get a hold of people on the phone. They don't want to attend public meetings. But here we have, they were asked at the end of the survey, would you be willing to provide, of course, your name, your email address, and your zip code in case we might want to contact you for future VDOT activities, whether it may be another survey, whether it might be serving on a focus group or a panel or whatever. And almost half the people who responded to the survey were willing to give up that personal information to be involved in future VDOT activities, which
I think both Brad and I wouldn't be surprised, because I think we have a very engaged populace here.
I think there's a lot to be said for that. Yep. But you know, it really is a great validation of the community and people's willingness to become involved, which goes back to those other numbers of, you know, 20% plus of the people actually attending a public meeting. That's pretty remarkable. And you know, being willing to become involved. So
Lou, I think it's also an indication of the quality of your interactions and VDOT's interactions with the people that Even with a bad taste in their mouth, they obviously had a good impression. Nice work.
We've got a great group, and I include you all too, because you have been important partners being out in the community as well and being able to engage with people and provide accurate information. Because I'm a firm believer in one of the biggest antidotes to people's reluctance to accept things is their lack of accurate, complete information. And engaging the community and having people who are willing to go out there and talk about it and answer questions is really key to helping people to accept what's being built. It's not just VDOT, it's anything out there, particularly with governance. We all know about that. So, any other questions?
Did you ever know Steve typed it in?
Yes. Sure did.
I think you've set that new image for me. This guy was a communications guy in the Northern Virginia district. We actually closed in the interstate south of DC one evening to set some beams for the Springfield interchange. Completely closed the southbound interstate. And there was so much advance notice of it that it became sort of a local public event. An area was blocked off for people to come and watch it. And the first night it was planned, it had to be called off at about midnight. Were you there then, John? It had to be called off sometime between 11 p.m. and midnight because some strong winds had rustled up. And I was at VDOT at the time, and I thought, this is gonna be terrible. We closed the interstate, zero negative reaction, zero. It was rescheduled for the next weekend. Another big crowd of people came out, and I think it was certainly the only front page positive story about the Springfield interchange in the Washington Post. And it goes to really show, Lou, and all, being quite serious, the value of shoe leather and just showing up and telling people what's going to happen and then doing what you say you were going to do. And you really demonstrated that here. I know everybody did. You had a lot of help and all that's good, but it takes somebody to lead each aspect of it, and the results speak for themselves.
Lou, I had a quick question.
Yes.
This is slide 40, where it provides a little bit of a breakdown of the people who were aware of the advertising campaign, how they came across the ads.
Yes.
67% TV, 40% radio. I'm just curious, do we have the rest of that? I'm just curious where newspaper runs.
I knew. I was glad that I brought the whole deck. Yeah, okay, so TV 67, radio 40%, newspapers 19%. Internet and website, interestingly, only 3%. Road signs 1%, personal contacts 1%, email 1%, area businesses and signs 1%. Don't know, not sure. 1%.
Thanks.
Very good. This is a big drop off.
Lou, you might, because I don't know the answer to this, I presume that's a public document?
Yes.
From SIR?
Yeah, I need to get the final, this was the draft that they sent us, I need to get the final, but I was gonna suggest if anybody wants to see it.
Well, I was gonna say we could also post it, when we post the minutes, we could just post it. Post it, okay?
Absolutely.
Let's do that. Because it is a lot of good information and it's very thorough. But Lou's summary is
I appreciate it.
is very good.
It may reduce the need for sleeping pills.
Thank you, Lou. Thanks so much. This next item, I'm just gonna touch on because it's really not yet quite right for a full discussion, but it has to do with phase 2 of the adaptive signal program. Right off the bat, I wanna say that nobody's talking about abandoning the adaptive signal program, the improved signal program. We might just, as a result of some research that's taken place since we've been meeting, go at it a different way, but it's gonna require some additional conversations with the county and the city. the bottom line is that we may be able to accomplish the goals that we set through a different method that's gonna save some money and return some revenue sharing money back to the localities. Matt Shiley and his folks have been talking about this internally. I know with Joel's folks and the district traffic engineers folks, but some additional conversations need to take place before we make a recommendation. But I think it's just important to note that the goals of this program aren't changing, but there may be a change in method. Is that fair to say? There's a change in technology. Matt has shared a lot of details with that with me, and I started to bring all that forward today, but there's some conversations that just need to take place with the city and the county, so we'll all come at this jointly. And we should be able to review that in March. Like I said, the good news is that of this balance and what we expected to spend on phase 2 would be less and return some revenue sharing back to the locality, which is always a good thing. So we'll have more on that in March.
Can you give us some nutshell about the change in technology that's being considered?
We wouldn't plug in the last piece of the phase 2 as it was planned and rely more on monitoring and management with what we installed as part of phase 1. In a nutshell, I think that's it. Now, Matt could give you a much better nutshell than I can, but I just want to make sure they have these discussions with the county and the city.
Does that sound like more human control and less automation?
So we'll have more on
Balance?
that. Matt?
Yes, sir, it does, the change in the controller technology and where we're headed, where VDOT is headed with controller technology now versus where it was back when some of these voter decisions were made. I just thought it was best to pause and revisit this to make sure we're making the best decision, best to knowing what we know now, knowing what, might be coming in the future.
But it's still it's still technologically driven.
That's right, still technologically driven, but we will be able to actively manage and respond to signals and signal problems and manage our traffic signals with people, like you said, versus automation.
Okay, I think I get that.
With better results.
Absolutely. That's what we're seeing.
Bucking the worldwide trend towards automation.
Well, artificial intelligence isn't all that smart.
Sometimes real intelligence is a good thing, right?
The hydraulic area panel, Chip really led the way here. If you recall, the secretary had asked Chip to coordinate the kind of collection of a group of people to be on the panel, and we've stayed out of the way of that, and Chip's done a good job. These are the panel members in alphabetical order, so no intended level of importance here, but you see
Although, of course, Chip is the most.
3 familiar names. Yes, Chip is first. Chip Morgan and Mark will carry over on the hydraulic panel. Vito Chetta, who I think is a local developer.
The developer and on the county's hydraulic advisory committee.
Right. Kathy Galvin, city councilor. Alex is the director. I can't remember the title.
Neighborhood Development.
Director of Neighborhood Development. Kurt Kieseker, I think, is the city's planning commission chair. Or member, yeah. Diantha, the chair of the board of supervisors. John O'Connor is one of the senior vice presidents of O'Connor Development, the new owners of Sponefield. Chuck Rotkin, well-known in the area. Del Sanders is the manager of the Holiday Inn down near Hydraulic. Alan Taylor from Riverbend Development. Two of these folks, and we did this in the first panel, and certainly are happy to do it here. Two individuals, Chuck and John O'Connor, asked if they could name an alternate. And what we said, it's the same rule we've used all along. If you want to name an alternate, that's fine, but you gotta pick somebody. In other words, it's not just a random, I showed up for Johnny. So Peter Bergner is an alternate for John O'Connor. David Mitchell is an alternate for Chuck. Those folks are aware that their names are going to be here today. Their full contact list for them, email and phone number, will be posted on the website. Lou and Debbie are looking at the website to see how it'll change a little bit as hydraulic comes on and these projects and our construction projects on Route 29 Solutions wind down a bit. Pick somebody. In other words, it's not trying to think if there's anything else new there. Chip and Dave are working with some consultants that will be providing some technical support for both the land use planning piece and then whatever falls out of that into the transportation planning piece. And I think all of that should be in place soon. The first meeting of the hydraulic panel will be March the 9th. And right now we're looking at a little bit different where we've been meeting every other week. We're going to meet twice a month. So 2 months a year, we won't meet 3 times. That's the game plan so far. Mark, you want to?
Well, I just got to thinking about it that when I was looking at it, realized there were just 3 of us actually who carry over, and whether there should be some information sharing back or sharing forward between the two as part of a regular agenda item.
Well, I think we can, for the period of time that this panel continues to exist, we can certainly.
To the end of the year.
Well, I was going to talk about that I was going to ask you about that, quite frankly, as part of the new business. Because remember, we set 3 meetings, January, February, and March. So, well, we can just talk about that now. We set 3 meetings, January, February, and March, and we came around to the 3rd Thursday of each month. We can set April, May, and June. You know, we now know from Dave that the design build projects are looks like they're gonna be wrapped up by the end of June, which leaves Hillsdale, and not that it's not important by any stretch of the imagination, but do we wanna continue through October meeting, or do we wanna think about that? After we get through 3 more meetings. I mean, I'm open to whatever you think, and we don't have to decide it today.
Not that I'm ever eager for more meetings, but it feels to me like Hillsdale is still, it's interjurisdictional, it's something that affects a lot of people. It makes sense to have this sort of public oversight going forward through that process.
Sure. No, that's fine. I mean, that's fine.
Is there any reason why you can't merge Hillsdale updates with the hydraulic discussions?
There's no reason we can't merge it with the hydraulic discussions. It would just be with a different group of folks that are focused on the land use piece, at least for the first 6 or 8 months of their work.
I imagine the Hillsdale
decide.
construction will impact the outcomes of land use and traffic
Right.
on hydraulic in 29.
We
There will certainly be plenty of discussion about that project and
right.
end result.
Right. No, that's fine. We could, it's something we could talk about over the next 3 months as the hydraulic panel.
That's just an idea.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's, there's no, that's, can't merge it with the hydraulic discussion. That's not a bad suggestion at all. What we just need to make sure we do in the first phase of the hydraulic panel is stay focused on that land use piece. You know, we didn't do that at Rio, we didn't do that for this go around, it's a different set of circumstances, and, we're doing it differently this time, so. But that,
I think by the time they start talking about transportation planning, the Hillsdale will be done.
Hillsdale will be done by the end of October. We all have to go out and work on it. Why don't we set our meetings for April, May, and June? And, you know, I even thought at one time, quite honestly, and I talked to Chip about it, was, boy, is there some way to do both on the same day? That's a bit of a heavy, pardon me?
So I'm sure it's fine with me.
Me too, because I'm.
Well, it's a heavy lift, I think, for the folks that are on both panels. It's a little bit of a heavy lift for
You're
whoever
paying
might
by
be
the hour,
facilitating.
right?
I'm paid whether I show up or not.
No,
I don't get paid overtime, so you
Yeah.
might as well abuse me as much as you want.
the joke is, you're volunteering your time while
There we
you're
go.
paid, but you're still volunteering your time.
There we go.
I think we should my advice would be that we set our meetings for April, May, and June. And then see how things fall out. Having said that, about April, the CTB is meeting here the 18th and 19th, John?
That's correct.
The 18th is a workshop, the 19th is
March.
of April, I'm sorry, April.
I don't get paid overtime, so
Can we actually
as much as you want.
The joke is,
make sure we have the dates right for April?
Yeah, April would be April the 20th. I think we should
It's our
my
meeting.
advice would be that we set our meeting. May the 18th, unless I look wrong.
Well, were we going for the third or the fourth?
Third.
3rd,
We're wrong place, okay. that's-
Third.
You're right, yes.
April the 20th. Said that about April. May the 18th. CTB is meeting here. And June the 15th. The 18th is a workshop, the 19th is
Now, one thing that occurs to me is,
of April.
as this group, the projects wind down, our meetings probably can be shorter.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, April would be April the 20th.
1 hour.
3/4 of the construction
45 minutes.
project's gonna drop off, absolutely.
Then, if you want to meet with the other guys after that, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't.
Well,
But
that,
it gives you an extra flexibility.
Yeah,
If you want to
yeah.
consider it.
yeah, but April 20, May 18, June 15. The one question I wanted to ask you about April was if the Commonwealth Transportation Board is going to be in town on the 18th and 19th, the secretary wouldn't mind introducing the panel to the CTB. It's not something we have to do. I don't know if you would be interested in meeting on the 18th or the 19th instead of the 20th, and I don't know. Yeah. If that's something you're interested or care about.
Since we're already all in town, we're on this panel, if there were an event or a section of the meeting where we were invited to come to their meeting,
Yes,
we could do that as a separate thing and still have our meeting
on the 20th.
on the 20th.
Okay.
Does that
Okay.
make sense? Or would you-
Well, let me just talk to Charlie, John, or you talk to him, and, it may be an opportunity. He's really, Aubrey and Charlie are really pleased with the work you all have done, and it might be an
They
opportunity.
could invite us to dinner.
They may invite you to dinner, that's not a bad idea, could toss that out there. But an opportunity for the other members to see you guys. Okay, we'll keep our meeting April 20th, and we'll document this, obviously. May 18th, yes, back at the other place at the Research Council, and June the 5th. Well, let me just talk to Charlie. Chip, any wrap up? Morgan? Mark? Nope. Brad?
Sorry about the lights. I figured I had
The lights?
the lights
Under
of
the bridge of the train.
Oh, no!
Well, I had everybody here, that's why.
No problem, no
I tried to
problem.
figure out
Chip,
who to
thanks,
talk to first.
Chip, thanks again for location, and Wood, thank you very much, very much. All right, we're done. Can you turn off the podcast?